As President Trump prepares his message for his first address before a joint session of Congress Tuesday night, he took time during a meeting with governors to announce some details of a budget proposal he plans to send to Congress next month. The commander-in-chief says he plans to make government more lean and accountable.
My first budget will be submitted to the Congress next month. This budget will be a public safety and national security budget, very much based on those two, with plenty of other things, but very strong. And it will include a historic increase in defense spending to rebuild the depleted military of the United States of America at a time we most need it.
CBSN political contributor and RealClearPolitics reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns is here. Caitlin, so great to see you.
Good to see you too.
So I want to start by asking you about the president's budget proposal. He's calling for a historic rise in defense spending by saving money from other areas of government. What more has the White House outlined? What stood out to you?
Well, what's interesting about this budget is that he is unveiling one. There were questions about whether he would do so. Also, I'm interested to see is what the reaction is from Republican lawmakers. You do have Republican lawmakers who have wanted an increase in defense spending, who have pointed to the sequester and defense cuts as a bad thing. But they're also extremely cautious about any kind of new spending. And we also know that President Trump campaigned on not touching things like Medicaid and Social Security and kind of entitlement programs. And so that's also been a big priority of people like Paul Ryan and conservatives in Congress. So it will be interesting to see how he frames this tomorrow evening in his joint session address and what the response is from people in his own party, because he's not traditionally a conservative on budget measures.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that the lack of action, or at least the lack of seemingly prioritizing cutting entitlement spending, is that perhaps a place where Congress might butt up against this White House?
It's certainly. Well, what's really interesting is that Trump has defied conservative orthodoxy in a lot of different things, but particularly when it comes to government intervention in certain things. And so he's made no, he's made no secret that this is what he wants to do. He campaigned vigorously on not touching this. So he could find Democratic allies on this. But you also have Republican lawmakers wanting to work with this president because they want to get a lot of things done. So they don't really want to rock the boat too much. They're kind of waiting for what direction he gives tomorrow.
The president also met with several governors indicating that infrastructure is going to be high on the priority. Healthcare is going to be high on the priority list for him. What else do you think, stands out about that meeting? And also, what has been the reaction of governors?
Well, when he met with governors, what's really interesting about governors and healthcare is that you do have Republican governors from states that Trump won, places like Ohio and elsewhere, that have taken the Medicaid expansion and actually quite like how it's been working in their states. John Kasich is a good example. Late last year, you had Republican governors talking about ways that they wanted to kind of preserve parts of that program. And so that's an interesting kind of contrast. He's also, talking to governors, too, about different healthcare challenges and all sorts of different things. Scott Walker, of course, is now the chairman of the National Governors Association. He was in Washington meeting with Donald Trump. He will be interesting to watch because he's been a very conservative governor, as we know. And so this was kind of an interesting meeting. We haven't really seen Trump interact with these kinds of heads of their states.
What about the issue of Russia and alleged contacts between Trump officials or officials of the Trump campaign and Russian officials? There was initially a call, perhaps some say that it was misinterpreted, but Darrell Issa seems to be walking back this notion of a special prosecutor to investigate that. Where do things go from here? I mean, Darrell Issa is a Republican, tight race, re-election race for him. So, that's something that certainly people have raised, is that, look, this guy is in a tough spot, so he's saying what he needs to say to get reelected. He didn't really mean it.
I think that's exactly right. I don't think Darrell Issa is representative of where the Republican Party in Congress is on this issue. It is interesting because he used to chair House Oversight, of course, but he did just win re-election by a thin margin. I'm kind of interested in lawmakers like him who are in these districts where either Trump won by a very close margin or where Hillary Clinton won by a close margin as well. Those are going to be some of your more vulnerable Republicans who might speak out on this, but I don't think you're going to see a groundswell from Republicans wanting to go further in terms of having a special prosecutor. Also, because there are already investigations underway in Congress. And lawmakers have wanted to kind of focus on that, let these panels do their work and see what the outcome is.
Yeah, speaking of which, we heard House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, who's leading one of the 3 congressional investigations. Let's go ahead and play a little bit of what he said about their ongoing investigation.
Not that I'm aware of. We still have not seen any evidence of anyone that from the Trump campaign or any other campaign for that matter that's communicated with the Russian government. We have the scoping of our investigation finished, and then we're going to move into actually receiving the evidence. But as of right now, the initial inquiries I've made to the appropriate agencies, I don't have any evidence. What I'm concerned about is this. No one is focusing on major leaks that have occurred here. We can't run a government like this. A government can't function with massive leaks at the highest level of our president talking to foreign leaders.
All right, so we heard there's not been evidence found of ties between Trump officials and Russia. He's also very concerned about the leaks. What do you make of that?
Well, interestingly, his counterpart, his Democratic counterpart, Adam Schiff, who's the ranking member of that committee, says, wait, we haven't drawn any conclusions yet. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on. The issue of the leaks is something that the president and the White House have been pretty vigorous on. We saw with all this controversy that was the focus of the president. He is continuing to lash out about leaks. We know that previous administrations have done this before. Nobody likes leaks. They always happen. But Trump has focused on that as a way to kind of distract from some of the issues involving Russia. And so I think you're going to see people like Nunes, who was a member of the transition team, has been guiding the president, advising the president-elect at the time. He is going to be supportive of him. You're going to have some dissenters. But by and large, again, I think Republicans are kind of focusing right now on what they want to get done policy-wise, because they just came from town halls in their districts where they didn't really have much to offer their constituents. And so I think that's going to be kind of the priority on Capitol Hill this week.
All right, let's talk about Tuesday night and President Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. We've heard Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell say that he expects the address to be, quote, bold, optimistic, and upbeat. What do we know? I mean, upbeat sounds like perhaps that might be a little bit of a stretch for some people, but what do we know about the themes of President Trump's address?
Right. Anytime that people from the Trump campaign or the presidency have previewed these speeches, they haven't turned out exactly how they previewed them. The inauguration was a good example of that. I think the president wants to outline his campaign promises. He wants to make clear what he believes has been successful in the first month. He thinks that the media has not covered everything that he's done to his liking. But what's also interesting, we saw in the inauguration address that he was standing in front of lawmakers from both parties saying, pox on both your houses. I'm taking it to the establishment. And so I'm wondering what kind of directive he gives to members of Congress, particularly those in his own party. They're kind of a little bit restive right now. They're not really sure what he's going to say. They know that he has similar priorities as they do, but they also want a little more direction from him. He said he would come out with an Obamacare repeal and replace plan, for example. Still hasn't done that. And so I think you're going to have a little bit of tension in that room. Certainly you're going to have many Democratic lawmakers not quite as enthusiastic, of course. So I'm kind of interested to see how they react.
Yeah, I mean, will there be anything you think? It's hard to speculate, but in terms of infrastructure, for instance, that's been an area where we've consistently heard President Trump express his support for that idea, and that's something the Democrats support. Right,
exactly. And you've heard Nancy Pelosi saying, you know, where is this jobs bill you've been talking about? Where is this infrastructure plan? Democrats had identified those two issues as areas they could work on together. But since inauguration, you've seen Democrats really back away from any notion of working with Donald Trump because their base, and we've seen this really active, newly active Democratic base kind of pushing against everything Trump's doing. And so you're also going to see at these kinds of events statements made by the guests that people bring. Democrats are bringing people like immigrants and refugees, and we'll see who Republican lawmakers bring. But that's also a way to kind of make a statement about what they think. And of course, the rebuttal to this speech will be given by a former Kentucky governor who will be focused on health care. And so that kind of shows where the priorities are for Democrats.
All right, a lot to watch. Caitlin.